All righty. Well, have you ever embarrassed yourself? I'm sure none of you have ever done that. You've never done anything that really embarrassed you so badly that you really regretted it. We're not just talking about a little, blushing moment, but a moment that you really regretted. That you said something or you did something, and as soon as you did, you thought to yourself, why did I do that? Why did I say that? And you can just continue to beat yourself up over it. Even though the people that maybe you offended by that are assuring you it's okay, we forgive you, but you just continue to hang on to it. You beat yourself up. You really fear that you've ruined relationships and your life is not going to be the same because of that major faux pas that you made. If you've ever been in that kind of situation, you can relate to Peter in this passage that we're going to be looking at today. Peter kind of finds himself in that kind of situation. We are wrapping up our series, Regaining Our Childlike Awe, today. We've been going through the Gospel of John, looking for those inspiring, awe-inspiring moments in Jesus' life and in the story of Jesus' ministry to kind of rekindle that spark in our relationship with the Lord. And today we have made it through the last chapter. We are going to be in chapter 21, and we're going to focus kind of the majority of the time, focus on Peter and how Jesus deals with Peter and that major blunder that Peter made. So if you will turn to John chapter 21, we're going to begin with John chapter 1, verses 1 through 14. John chapter 21, verses 1 through 14. After this, Jesus revealed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias. And he revealed himself in this way. Simon Peter, Thomas called the twin, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and two others of his disciples were together. Simon Peter said to them, I am going fishing. They said to him, we will go with you. They went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Just as day was breaking, Jesus stood on the shore, yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, children, do you have any fish? They answered him, no. He said to them, cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some. So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because of the quantity of fish. The disciple whom Jesus loved therefore said to Peter, it is the Lord. When Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he was stripped for work, and threw himself into the sea. The other disciples came in the boat, dragging the net full of fish, for they were not far from the land, but about 100 yards off. When they got out on land, they saw a charcoal fire in place, with fish laid out on it and some bread. Jesus said to them, bring some of the fish that you have caught. So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore, full of large fish, 153 of them. And although there were so many, the net was not torn. Jesus said to them, come and have breakfast. Now none of the disciples dared ask him, who are you? They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came and took the bread and gave it to them, and so with the fish. This was now the third time that Jesus was revealed to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. So we'll stop right there. This is the third time, John says, that people saw Jesus. So here John gives us another eyewitness account of people seeing Jesus alive after the resurrection. Now, on several occasions, we saw last time and this time, for some reason, the disciples didn't recognize Jesus. And this group that's there this time, his close disciples, the people who had been with Jesus for 3 years, but for some reason, they were not able to recognize Jesus. And John doesn't tell us why that was the case. So scholars have kind of developed their own thinking as to why his close disciples wouldn't recognize Jesus. Some scholars say, well, it's because he took such a beating during his arrest and the cruelty of being crucified on the cross that when he rose from the dead, his body was just unrecognizable because it was so beat up. Others say that, well, no, the resurrected body was different than his physical body. And they base that on, the accounts last time we talked about Jesus just kind of appearing in a room where the doors were locked. So the body that he had was able to kind of walk through doors, if you will, or just appear and disappear. And then there was a time, the men walking on the road to Emmaus where maybe just supernaturally Jesus' identity was hidden from them for a while, just kind of test their faith. So we really don't know for sure why, what was so different about Jesus' resurrected body compared to his pre-resurrection body. But there was something different because his closest friends were not able to recognize him visually. It wasn't until they heard him and saw what he was doing that they realized, this is the Lord. There's something interesting going on here in relation to Jesus and Peter. As I read that text to this morning, it may have seemed familiar to you because it's very similar to the first time Peter met Jesus, when Jesus called him into ministry. Now remember, at this point, Peter had denied Jesus 3 times. Right? Jesus, on the night that he was betrayed, he said one of the disciples was going to turn on him, right? They were going to turn him in to the authorities. And everyone said, oh, it's not me, it's I. And Peter was so emphatic that I will go to death for you. I would never do that. I would never deny you. And Jesus says, well, as a matter of fact, tonight you're going to deny me 3 times. And Peter, just no way Peter thought that was going to happen, but we all know it did. And Matthew records for us that he felt so badly, that 3rd time he denied Jesus, that Matthew records, quote, Peter went out and wept bitterly. So it was one of those moments where he couldn't believe he had done it. How could he have betrayed and denied his Lord? And he really took it hard. I believe that he just didn't feel worthy to be a disciple anymore. And when Jesus is now resurrected and he's back with Jesus, he thinks that he made such a big mistake that relationship can never be like it was. And what we're seeing here is Jesus reconciling Peter to himself. And this event here in John 21 is so similar to the event when Jesus first called Peter. That first calling is found in Luke chapter 5. We turn to Luke chapter 5, verses 4 through 6. Luke chapter 5, verses 4 through 6. And when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch." And Simon answered, "Master, we toiled all night and took nothing. But at your word I will let down the nets." And when they had done this, they enclosed a large number of fish, and their nets were breaking. And if you continue to read that, that's when Jesus said, "Come and follow me. I will make you fishers of men." So that event was when Peter first committed to following Jesus. And now when Peter is doubting himself because he had denied Jesus, Jesus comes, finds Peter there fishing, and kind of repeats that miracle. It's as if he is trying to remind Peter, you were called to follow me. Remember, Peter was a commercial fisherman. I don't think when he told his fellow disciples, I'm going fishing, that he was just out for a leisurely time at the lake just to blow off steam. He didn't take a rod and some bait and just, I'm just going to go fish. No, he was a commercial fisherman. So many scholars believe that what this is saying is that Peter had given up on his calling and he had gone back to the only life he knew, that he was going to go back to fishing. So Jesus came and reminded him, hey, no, you still have work to do. I've forgiven you. You need to get back to work. It's a very special moment between Jesus and Peter. Reminding him, what are you doing here fishing? I've called you to be a fisher of men. Now let's continue in John 21, and we'll see this conversation going further, and the reconciliation process continues. John 21, verses 15 through 19. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, feed my lambs. He said to him a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, tend my sheep. He said to him a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, do you love me? He said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go. This he said to show by what kind of death he was to glorify God. And after saying this, he said to him, follow me. So this is really the meat of the lesson for us. It's showing Jesus' love toward Peter and the grace that Jesus gave Peter. Peter remembers what he did. He remembers that he denied Jesus 3 times. And he just can't forgive himself. He claimed, I will lay down my life for you. And then a few hours later, he's denying Jesus. That really had to get to him, really hurt him. And he felt that Jesus would never accept him again. Now that Jesus has been resurrected, Peter doesn't know where he stands, really. But Jesus goes out of his way to find Peter and to minister to him. And he shows Peter that he's forgiven him by asking him 3 times, do you love me? The same number of times that Peter denied Jesus. This conversation really shows us 3 things. It shows us 1 thing about Jesus' love for Peter and 2 things about Peter's love for Jesus. So if you're following along in your bulletin, the first bullet point there is regarding Jesus' love for Peter. Jesus met Peter where he was. Jesus met Peter where he was. Peter had pretty much given up on himself. All right, so he went back to his old ways of fishing. So Jesus went to where Peter was, met him where he was, performed the same miracle that he had performed when he first called Peter, reminding him that he was called for a purpose, reminding him of the 3 years that Peter had spent with Jesus and all the miracles that he had done, all the people that he had forgiven, reminding him that he is forgiven, that Jesus had already forgiven him, and it was time to get back to work. Jesus asked Peter 3 times, "Do you love me?" The first time after Peter said, "Yes, I love you," Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." The second time he said, "Do you love me?" Peter said, "Yes, I do." Jesus said, "Tend my sheep." The third time, "Do you love me?" Peter gets a little upset. He says, "You know all things. Of course I love you." And then again, Jesus says, "Feed my sheep." 3 times Jesus asked Peter, "Do you love me?" 1 for each of the times Peter denied Jesus. It's Jesus' way of saying, "Peter, I forgive you. Now you need to forgive yourself." How many of us hang on to our sins, those embarrassing moments, those stupid things that we do? Others forgive us. Jesus has forgiven us, but we just don't forgive ourselves. We hang on to it. We keep beating ourselves up. Jesus doesn't want us to hang on to it. If Jesus has forgiven us, we need to forgive ourselves. Too often, I think we are quicker to forgive others than we are to forgive ourselves. There's also another subtle thing going on here that if you look at the original language, some scholars kind of make a big deal of it, others don't so much. You know how, I'm sure you've heard that the Greek language has multiple words for the word love, that translates to our English word love. We only have one word. And when we say we love something, it can be anywhere from "I love ice cream" to "I love this TV show," "I love the Broncos." I don't love the Rockies so much this year, but "I love this pair of pants." Anything up to "I love my children," "I love my spouse," "I love the Lord." It's the same word, but there's such a wide range of difference in what that really means. Well, the Greek language has different words for each level of affection or each level of meaning. And if you look at the Greek, Jesus asks Peter in those first 2 instances, "Do you agape me? Do you love me?" And agape is a deep, selfless, unconditional love that is usually equated with the love of God. But when Peter responds, "Yes, Lord, I phileo you." And that is more of a brotherly love. Philadelphia is the city of brotherly love. It's named after, its root is phileo, which means a brotherly love. So 2 times Jesus says, "Do you agape me?" And Peter responds, "Of course I phileo you." But then the 3rd time, Jesus asks, "Do you phileo me?" And Peter responds, "Yes, I phileo you." Now, again, some scholars will say that's significant. And again, it shows how Jesus met Peter where he was. Peter just wasn't quite ready to make that commitment, that selfless, unconditional, loving commitment that Jesus was asking for. So Jesus brings it down to his level. But other scholars will say, in this context, those 2 words really are interchangeable. The important point is that Jesus is restoring Peter back to his calling, back to his ministry. He's showing Peter that he is forgiven. He predicted that Peter was going to deny him. He knew it was coming. He's forgiven him, and he's wanting to get Peter back in the game. So that's the first lesson that we can learn from this regarding Jesus' love for Peter. Now let's look at 2 lessons that we can learn regarding Peter's love for Jesus. The first thing that we learn is that Peter's love for Jesus, it brought him a task. It brought him a task. Each time Jesus asked, "Do you love me?" and Peter said yes, Jesus gave him a task. Right? Feed my lambs. Tend my sheep. Feed my sheep. If you love me, get to work. I called you to carry out a mission for me. Quit feeling sorry for yourself and get back to work. The message for us in this is that our Christianity, our love for Jesus should not be passive. Our love for Jesus comes with a task. We are all called to be workers in Jesus' kingdom. But too many of us don't get that. We just sit by and watch others work. Jesus wants us to carry out a task for him. You know, there's a rule in society. It's called the 80-20 principle. And unfortunately, it applies to a lot of areas of life, but it even applies to the church. And what that rule in the church is that 80% of the work done in the church is done by 20% of the people. And in some cases, I would go so far as to say that 90% of the work done in the church is done by 10% of the people. Too many Christians sit back and let other people do the work, when we are all called to do the work. The Lord's flock still needs tending to. And he's called each one of us to work, to play a part in that. If you love Jesus, tend his sheep. Loving Jesus comes with a task. It brings us a task to do. I understand, that the older we get, there are less physical jobs that we can do. Maybe back when we were younger, we were able to, climb up on the roof and fix leaky roofs or do plumbing jobs or electrical or clean the church or mow the lawn. There's a lot of physical things that have to be done in a church. And as we age, we're not able to do a lot of those physical things anymore. But there's still a lot of other tasks that need to be done. And not enough workers to do them. You know what, and some of these tasks are short-term, some of these tasks are long-term. But for the remainder of our life, we are to be workers for Jesus. So I challenge you to find something to do. There's lots of things to do. I'm going to be working up some lists of things that need to be done that anybody can do. One of them we've already started. We have a sign-up sheet out there for greeters. That's not a very difficult thing to do, but it's very important. Greeting somebody as they walk in with a smile and a handshake or a hug and giving them a bulletin, very easy to do from a physical standpoint, but it's very important. It may be the first smile that person has seen all week. There's lots of other things. Calling one another. We have a close-knit family. We know what's going on in each other's lives. Just picking up the phone and calling somebody. Checking in. Hey, I missed you Sunday. Well, you doing okay? Lots of things that we can do as part of God's family. In the Lord's family, we are called to be producers. In society, there are producers and consumers. And far too many people in society are consumers. They just sit back and they benefit from the production of other people. Well, in the church, Jesus has called us to be producers. Yeah, we can consume. We can take advantage of the production of our brothers and sisters. I think that's called a potluck. We take advantage of what other people cook. But no, the same is true in just the normal life of the church. We should be, most of the time, we should be producers. We should be working. We should be helping out. And then there are times where we need to be ministered to, and we become consumers. But just kind of look at the scale of your life. Is it heavily on the consumer side? We need to get up and go to work. Loving the Lord brings us a task. The second thing that it brought Peter, point number 2 of Peter's love for Jesus, it brought him a cross. Peter's love for Jesus brought him a cross. In verse 18, Jesus said to Peter, "Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go." Now, if John had stopped right there, I don't think we would have understood what that means. Because I sure don't. Stretching out, someone else is going to dress you and take... Thankfully, in verse 19, John tells us what that means. This he said to show by what kind of death he was to glorify God. Now, John doesn't tell us, but church history tells us that Peter ultimately was crucified for sharing the gospel. And church tradition tells us that Peter didn't feel worthy to die the same way that his Lord died, so he asked to be crucified upside down. Now, that's not in Scripture. That comes from 2nd century church history or church tradition, so it may or may not have happened that way. But we do know for a fact that Peter was crucified. So Peter's love for Jesus brought him across. In other words, for us, what that tells us is that there is a sacrifice. There is a cost for us to be followers of Jesus. We will sacrifice something. Jesus has asked us to give our life for him. You can't keep one foot in the world and one foot in Jesus' kingdom. He said, whoever wants to keep his life will lose it. But whoever gives up his life for my sake will keep it. But there are things that we have to sacrifice. We have to give up in order to follow Jesus. Serving Jesus comes at a cost. Jesus has called us to give up our life to follow him. Peter's love for Jesus brought him across. What have we sacrificed to serve Jesus? Look back over your life. Have we really made any sacrifices the way other Christians around the world have? Following Jesus comes with a task, and it comes with a cost. It comes with a sacrifice. Let's finish up the chapter looking at John chapter 21, verses 20 through 25. John 21, verses 20 through 25. Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following them, the one who also had leaned back against him during the supper and said, Lord, who is it that is going to betray you? When Peter saw him, he said to Jesus, Lord, what about this man? Jesus said to him, if it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me. So the saying spread abroad among the brothers that this disciple was not to die. Yet Jesus did not say to him that he was not to die, but if it is my will that he remains until I come, what is that to you? This is the disciple who is bearing witness about these things and who has written these things, and we know that his testimony is true. Now there are also many other things that Jesus did. Were every one of them to be written, I suppose that the world itself could not contain the books that would be written. So here in his closing remarks, John reveals that he is that disciple whom Jesus loved. Remember, I mentioned before that John is kind of writing this in third person. He never refers to himself. Now, I think there's only one or two times where he actually says John. Usually he'll say, as part of the sons of Zebedee, or usually it's the disciple whom Jesus loved. He was talking about himself. And here he reveals that he is that disciple. He is that eyewitness. He's the one that's writing this eyewitness account of who Jesus is and what all Jesus did. But he also leaves us with another important lesson. Just as Jesus reinstated Peter and he warned him of the great sacrifice that he was going to make. And I'm assuming that Peter recognized that what Jesus is saying here, you're going to die for me. Earlier you said you would lay down your life for me. Well, you are. You're going to be crucified. So right after that, as Jesus says, follow me, Peter turns around and sees John. and says, well, what about him? What's going to happen to him? There are a couple different ways you can read that. The way I choose to read is I think Peter genuinely cared for John. John was the youngest, or if not the youngest, one of the youngest disciples. Peter is kind of the head of the disciples, and Peter, James, and John were partners. They'd grown up together. They really loved one another. And Jesus just told Peter, you're going to die for me. You're going to be crucified for me. And I think he's generally concerned, well, what's going to happen to John? But Jesus, again, he has to refocus Peter's attention. He said, don't worry about John. Right? John is my responsibility. You follow me. You do what I tell you. Doesn't matter what I choose to do with John. That's between me and John. Those of you who have siblings, or those of you who have multiple kids, you've experienced the dynamic in a family. Siblings, kids, they always are comparing themselves to others. Right? Have you ever been handing out chores to your kids and you tell one to do something and they say, well, what's he going to do or what's she going to do? Right? And what do you say? Don't worry about it. I told you to do this. That's exactly what Jesus is telling Peter. All right, I'm handing out tasks. Loving me, following me comes with tasks. Peter, here's your task, and it's going to lead you to a cross. Oh, well, what about John? Don't worry. You just do what I tell you to do. And that's a tough lesson for us. We need to learn that because it's human nature, right? We want to always compare ourselves to others. We want to compare our gifts to others, compare our struggles with others. And we ask, why not? Why am I going through this and they never do? Jesus says, don't compare yourself with others. You just do what I tell you to do. How many times have we looked at the giftings of others and said, oh man, I wish I could. I wish I could play the piano like that person. I wish I could sing like that person. I wish I could bake like that person. I wish I was a mechanic like that person. Whatever it is. Then, if I had those gifts, then I would be able to serve the Lord. But since I don't have those gifts, I'm just going to sit back because, I don't have anything to contribute. No, we all have gifts. And Jesus doesn't want us comparing our gifts to others. He gives us gifts and says, now use those for this task that I'm giving you. If I needed you to play the piano, then I would have given you that gift. You can't play the piano? Don't try. Go do this other thing that I've given you. All right? I don't need you to play the piano today. I need you to go do whatever. Right? But we do that. We compare. We want to measure up to our siblings, right? Our brothers and sisters in Christ. But the lesson we get out of this end of the book here is stop comparing yourself to others. Go home, look in the mirror, and honestly ask yourself, what gift has Jesus given me? Now, today, that gift might be different than it was 20 years ago. Right? We were able to do more physical things 20 years ago than we are today. But there are still gifts that he has given you that he wants you to put to use for him. So don't compare yourself to others. Jesus says, don't worry about others. You follow me. I've given you what you need. Now go do your job. When you look at the apostles, they're good examples for us. We kind of can sit back and compare. Okay, Peter, what did the gifts that Peter had? He was really the main disciple. He was the shepherd of the early church, and he ministered, mostly he ministered to Jewish Christians. He had a few forays into the Gentile world, but for the most part, Peter was focused on the Jewish Christians. And then there's Paul. Paul was the pioneer, right? He went traveling all over the country, all over the world, and was ministering more to the Gentiles. And then we have John. Little old John. What did he do? What's he known for? He's an eyewitness. He's the one that wrote this gospel that we just spent, I don't know how many weeks we've been studying. Over 21 weeks studying the Gospel of John. he bore witness to Jesus. He bore witness to what he saw, and he wrote the Gospel of John. But he didn't quit after he wrote that book. He also bore witness in a book called Revelation. Jesus gave him a vision and told him to write it down so that we knew what was going to happen in the end times. And it just so happens, starting in October, we are going to start studying the book of Revelation. And we're going to see more witnessing by John. But the point is, if you look at those three different apostles, they all had different gifts. Was any one more important than the other? No. They all did what God told them to do. What the Lord gave them the gifts to do, they used them and they did it. He wants the same from us. He wants us to use the gifts he gave us to minister to him, carry out that task, minister to others. You know, God's family still needs shepherding. They still need ministering to. The lost of this world still need to hear the gospel. They need us to bear witness to who Jesus is, to bring them into a saving relationship with Jesus Christ. There's work to be done. We are called to do it. Being a Christian comes with a task and a sacrifice. Being a member of God's family. That's just part of being a member of God's family. It comes with a task and sacrifice. And that's just part of being a member of Christ Church of the Valley family. It comes with a task and it comes with a sacrifice. And the Lord is calling us, don't worry about everyone else. You follow me.